Hi there and welcome to this video. I'd like to introduce you to one of the new features in NetAdvantage for Silverlight version 10.3, xamGrid string indexers and binding statements. One of the new features in Silverlight 4 was that binding capabilities were extended to allow you to have string indexers and binding statements. Starting in its 10.3 version, we've extended the xamGrid to allow you to use the string indexer syntax in the column object's key property to bind to values in objects. Basically, this allows you to bind columns using a string indexer. There's a couple of limitations on this approach that you need to keep in mind. At this time, support is only provided for string and integer indexers, and also if the indexer returns a specific type, which is not object, all features of the grid are supported. If that's not the case, if the indexer returns an object, sorting and grouping will work, but filtering, summaries, and the member of operator, which allows you to get access to the children of the object, will not be supported. So let's take a look at a sample to help us illustrate this feature. What we have here is the xamGrid, which is bound to some product data, and some of the columns were bound using string indexing. In this case, these are the units in stock, units in order, and reorder level columns. Furthermore, we have column layouts specified, which are automatically generated to display data which is nested underneath each product. So let's take a look at the code and see how we can use string indexing to bind the values. Okay, so I've opened up Visual Studio 2010 where I've created a small project which generates the sample we just saw. So I've added references to the xamGrid and the shared libraries version 10.3, and I have a single page and a product class which I use to generate my sample data. Okay, let's take a look at how the xamGrid is declared first. I add a reference to the Infragistics Controls grids namespace in the xamGrid assembly. Then here's how I declare the xamGrid itself. On top here we have a few standard columns which bind directly to properties in the object that is bound, and here we get to the units in stock column, which uses a string indexer to access values in the object. The same here goes for the units on order and the reorder level columns. In a second, we're going to look at how the implementation of the product object handles these. Moving further along, we have 3 column layouts which are bound to the outgoing orders collection, which is a property of the product details property. We have, at least in the first column layout, we specify only one of the columns to be shown, indicating this in the columns collection, and also specifying a value of false for the auto-generate columns at this column layout level. The second column layout is automatically generated, and it generates the columns to display the incoming orders. The same goes for the available in locations collection, which is also automatically generated. Okay, let's look at how the product class is implemented and how it handles these string indexers. Okay, we can take a look at the units in stock. As you see here, we have a dictionary which has a key of type string and a value of type int, and we're using this indexer over here to retrieve the values in response to a certain key. We basically index the dictionary with the key provided in the indexer, and we return the int value of the respective key value pair. So how do we set values to these key value pairs? Let's take a look at the loading of data in products. In this method here, load data, we initialize an observable collection and add to it instances of products which have been initialized as follows. What these properties basically encompass are references to the dictionary. So whenever we're setting a value for the units on order property when creating an instance of the product class, we're basically setting the value under the respective key in the dictionary for this object. And later on, when we're binding, we're basically indexing this dictionary and we're returning the value for this key value pair. Of course, string indexing is also supported at the column layout level. So you can generate entire column layouts using properties of your object, indexing them with a string indexer. This is very valuable in that it allows you to have a very flexible layout and generating at runtime column layouts in response to the objects in your bound items. They've been mapped to the respective key.
Infragistics. On the web at infragistics.com.